A week or two ago, a friend of mine who writes, Chris, suggested doing a Halloween challenge in which we all wrote a story with a ghost in it, Villa Diodati style. I said sure, confident an idea would present itself. Almost immediately, Jude, another proper writer friend, mentioned an open call for short autobiographical ghost stories. I thought, why not kill two ghosts with one stone and write about that stuff you don't even like thinking about? You can do it late at night as well for maximum shitting yourself up revisiting bad memories. My brain is an idiot sometimes. Anyway, here's the story. I wrote it last night. I call it I don't really believe in ghosts. Can a true life story by a man who doesn't believe in ghosts really be said to have a ghost in it? I'll swap it round. Can you really take seriously the idea that this is an autobiographical story, whether it has a ghost or not? Memory's tricksy after all. And almost as soon as I start writing, whatever truth there is going to be eroded by the drive to make a good story out of it, whatever the fuck that is. Anyway, some background while I work up the courage to write about the thing I'm going to write about. I nearly died when I was 5 or 6. I've no idea of the exact age. It's less dramatic than it sounds. When I was little, I jumped all duffel coat and mittens on elastic into a duck pond that turned out to be deeper than it looked. My parents were trying to wrangle my brother and sister, or maybe just my sister, and it was pure chance my dad realised he hadn't seen me for 5 minutes, looked up and realised not only that he couldn't see me, but there was a whole lot of splashing going on. Needless to say, I didn't die. It isn't that kind of story. The water probably came up to my dad's thighs, if that, and he dragged me out and made sure I was okay and then probably walloped me for being an idiot if I know him at all. Immediately, though, the truth becomes suspect. I think I remember this. But I suspect I'm actually remembering the nightmares I had about it when I was older, when I imagined there was something malignant in the water with me. I mention this because in the story I've cobbled together in my head, that's the first time I had the idea that there was something, I don't know, there, I guess, something bad. Memory is stupid. The hairs on the back of my neck are standing up as I write this. I should probably stop, but I'm committed now. Fast forward a bit, and we're still in Germany. I'm a Barrack brat, which is a pretty edgy way of saying my dad was in the Air Force and I moved around a lot as a kid. That constant serial uprooting might be relevant if you believe in psychology more than you do in hauntings. We moved into a block of flats, married quarters, somewhere in Germany. I have no idea where. Coincidentally, we moved into these flats at Halloween. I know it was Halloween because of what happened with the mask. I've no real idea where the mask came from. Maybe my dad bought it, maybe it belonged to one of his friends who was helping us move in. I remember what it looked like though. It was a witch, but not your funny, over-the-top green skin and warts and hooked nose and pointy hat witch. This was more evil, really. A hard plastic wizened death mask, turnip face with slitted eyes and a headscarf and sallow, unhealthy skin and a slit for a mouth. At some point, I was alone with the mask in what would be my bedroom, surrounded by the brown cardboard boxes that were a common feature of my life until I was 18. For some reason, I stuck my finger in the witch's mouth. Tricksy memory or not, but 40 years later as I write this, I can still bring to mind the rasping of those flimsy plastic lips over my finger, and my finger getting stuck. I should obviously have just pulled it back out, but I didn't. I screamed the place down instead for some reason, bringing all the adults running. I don't remember how my dad freed me from the toothless mouth and that ridiculous mask, but they told me later I was hysterical, inconsolable, unable to stop gulping and gasping and sobbing until the thing was out of the flat. Then I calmed down, for a bit. That night, I had the first nightmare I can remember, and I remember it vividly. I dreamt that the stairs that ran the length of the block descending down and down and down into the earth, spiral stairs lit by flickering torches, and that coming up those stairs from somewhere deep underground were witch masks, dozens of them, floating up with no bodies, empty eye sockets and empty lips, empty hard plastic coming to get me. I woke my parents up, having another bout of hysterics, and I understand I spent the next week or so sleeping with them, because if they tried to make me sleep in my own little bed, I'd wake up my sleeping baby sister as I tried to get out of the dreams. I never liked that block of flats. I hated the stairs at the end of the floor that went down to the ground, and I absolutely refused to go near the cellars, so I'm told. As they do, the nightmares stopped after a while. But as I write this down, as I go over these memories, my skin is crawling with cold and unease. Kids, eh? A few years later, we're just back in England, and I think we're living in Middlesex somewhere. I genuinely don't remember. I think I'm 8, maybe 9, working backwards and trying to assemble the jigsaw in my early years. We have a little house in the married quarters of the camp where my dad works. Almost as soon as we move in, I catch chicken pox somehow and spend a month or so isolated in one of the bedrooms. I still have the marks on my forehead from where I refused not to scratch, no matter how much chamomile lotion I was smeared with. I remember there's a big play park out the back of the house, which is nice. I won't find out until years later, overhearing my mum talking to a neighbour about the spooky shit she believes in, and I already don't. That there used to be a graveyard there, or that there was an old graveyard on the other side of the hedge at the back of the park, or something. The precise details don't matter. Graveyard is what I'm saying. After I recovered from the chicken pox, I was moved into the other bedroom, because I was a big boy now, and was supposed to have a room to myself. I forget why. When you're a kid, things just happen to you. I had nightmares every night I spent in that room, apparently. Not just me, either. My mum, who, as I said, believes in the uncanny with a kind of superstitious enthusiasm but no real direction, always claimed the room was too hot or too cold. She even claimed something tried to push her down the stairs in that house, and you should make of that whatever you will. All I know is that I dreamt that first night that there was something in the room with me. And again, typing this, my skin is tingling and I'm fighting the urge to look over my shoulder or whatever it is the cat is meowing at. Something horrible that wished me harm, and it hid not under the bed, but behind it, between the headboard and the wall. I used to dream that it whispered to me when I was in bed and the lights were off. And it's about this time, incidentally, that I started demanding the hall light be left on when I was in bed. Something that persisted throughout my childhood, and, if I'm honest, well into my young adulthood. My toddling brother and sister wouldn't spend time in that room voluntarily, even though that was where the toys were. I remember my mum telling her friend, while I was making an Airfix kit at the dining room table, that they would go in, get toys, and come out of the room and play with them downstairs instead. It's disappointing, but some bad dreams is the extent of what I remember about that house. I guess autobiographical stories tend to be anticlimactic. Bear that in mind as we go on. So we moved again, and then we moved to the Netherlands, where my dad worked at AFSEM, and I kind of forgot about all of this for a bit. And then one night, I had an absolute rager of a nightmare, apparently out of the blue, convinced there was something in the cellars under the flats that was after me. This time, though, it had evolved. It was a guy in an overcoat with orange eyes. I distinctly remember that he had orange eyes. You wouldn't easily get me into the cellars, incidentally. The steps down were locked with a gate. We lived on the 3rd floor at one end, beside the stairs that went down to the ground floor, and it was significantly easier when playing out to go up the side stairs rather than go to the central stairs where the lifts were. I remember that when it was time to come in, if I was by myself, I would run past that locked gate, up the stairs, and not stop until I was safely on the 1st floor landing, because I was convinced that if I went slowly, something would grab me between the bars. I never told anyone about this, of course. Kids can be weird like that, I understand. And again, because of the way 35-year-old memory works, I sometimes struggle to tell the difference between the bad dreams and the reality, mixing up the dreams of the orange-eyed man with the reality of running upstairs afraid I was going to be grabbed. The nightmares, over time, escalated a little, to a wee bit of the old night terrors. I remember vividly waking up one night to find a horrible angular thing that looked like a cross between a wardrobe and an armoured warrior standing at the bottom of my bed, staring at me, staring down at me, and I was unable to move or cry out, and then it lurched towards me, lurched over me, and I woke up, soaked in sweat, unable to breathe. I just lay there in the bed until dawn. I never told anybody about that either. Then the years get a bit messy. We moved back to England and I got hair in exciting places. I grew my first beard that has broadly continued to this day. I left home. I went to university. I discovered drinking. As we get closer to the actual incident I meant to write about when I started this, My hairs are standing up a little and I feel nauseous. I'm not sure I can finish it. I have to keep reminding myself I don't really believe in ghosts as such. So I went to university in Sunderland and I pretty much crashed and burned. Working it out on my fingers, I think it was probably either 93 or 1994 that I was living down near the Queen Alexandria Bridge in a first floor flat above a place that did, I want to say, bathroom fitting. I was living there with a couple of mates because the rent was a pittance and it was being paid by the council anyway, so I didn't really care where I was living. Calling it a flat is probably a bit strong. It was 4 rooms with a communal bathroom and a kitchen, both about as grotty as you'd imagine in a domicile that was only a few rungs above a squat and inhabited by 4 wasters in their early 20s. The landlord was largely conspicuous by his absence. It was alright, I guess. I had nothing going on in my life, nothing of note. I lived for running role-playing games and pissing away my dole money. One by one, though, my mates moved on, as people want to do in a university town. For a while, there were 2 of us, and that was fine. We hung out, we had friends over, one time we dropped acid. If this was a movie, I think they'd make more of that decision to try LSD in that particular flat, but in reality, as with a lot of such stories, it was just a bit of juvenile silliness that went nowhere. Nobody lost their minds, nobody claimed to see sinister figures in the closets, or thought they could fly or jumped off the roof. Nothing weird happened. Except that was the night we noticed that there were no right angles in the entire place. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but I swear I'm not making this up. One of us, I forget who, I don't think it was me, was lying on their backs in my mate's room, looking across the landing to the tiny hall that led to the grotty kitchen and the bathroom, and they noticed that none of the doors were straight, that they were all off slightly, and that the door frames were all just a little bit aslant. After we'd straightened up, we checked it again, and it was true. Nothing was quite on the level. Even the corners of the rooms didn't quite join up properly. It's hard to explain. It was just shoddy workmanship. But it was odd, and once you noticed it, you couldn't stop noticing it. My mate moved out, leaving me the only person still living in the flat. The 3 other rooms were locked up, waiting for new tenants, in theory. One night the shop got burgled. The landlord came round a bit more often and started to make noises about renovating the place and turning it into storage and looking meaningfully at me. My friends told me I should move out, but I was just comfortable and very lazy. I didn't spend a lot of time there. I didn't like it, to be honest. All my mates lived on the far side of the city centre and were happy to have me crash on their sofa when I was too legless to walk home. And so for a while, I just got on with things. We're getting to the meat of the story now, I promise. It was autumn. It might have been near Halloween, but that feels a bit too neat to be true. But it was autumn. It was dark and it was late. I walked home. I remember the walk well, and not only because I'd done it so often by this point. Through the echoing civic centre, rather than go through the middle of town, which would be rowdy, even at this kind of hour. Down past the university buildings and Weymouth Hall, past the traffic lights and the shuttered museum vaults, along the street down toward the bridge and the river. There was no fog, but there was a kind of wet grittiness in the air, and it washed out the orange and yellow street lights. I can't describe the light, but it is something that sticks in my mind. It was like everything was tinged with orange. I got home. I opened the front door next to the shop and flicked the light switch, and nothing happened. The bulb had gone. I stood there, starting to sober up, looking at the narrow staircase that led up to the half landing and then folded back on itself to the first floor where the rooms were. The light from the street showed me the stairs and a hint of the upper landing and the big window at the back, and nothing else. This was before mobile phones were a factor in my life, and I would need to climb the stairs in the dark to get to my room. And I was absolutely, completely certain that there was someone up there waiting for me. I can't explain it, and as I'm writing this it sounds like bullshit, but I knew that there was someone up there who shouldn't be there. It was 2 a.m, maybe later. The flats were empty, they were locked up, but there was someone there. I don't know how long I stood in the doorway like a goon with my keys in my hand. I wanted to be 10 minutes, but it was probably less than that. I think I was pretty sober by this point, or at least sober enough to know I was shitting myself, terrified, full of dread. The words, they're not getting across just how bone scared I was of whoever it was that was upstairs, lurking on the landing. I pushed myself forward, stepped over the threshold, and then that awareness of someone being up there changed, because now I knew, they knew, where I was. They were aware of me, and they were going to hurt me. And I practically jumped backwards through the door because I was genuinely terrified in that moment that it was going to slam behind me, trapping me in the house with whoever it was. Fuck it, whatever it was. That's what I really mean, whatever it was. And I don't believe in ghosts. I slammed the door and I kind of walked back up the street until I was a couple of blocks away. I kept looking back over my shoulder, convinced something was going to follow me, but it didn't. There was nobody there, of course. I went back to my mate's house and I told them I'd locked myself out and asked if I could crash, and I crashed on the sofa for a night and then for another night and then for a few more. Eventually I couldn't put it off anymore. I think I was having a gyro delivered of all things. And I went home. I went back to the flat during the day and I changed the light bulb. But I didn't go alone. I spent a couple more weeks, months there, but as few nights as I could. I went up the stairs cautiously when I had to, ready to run like a rabbit at the slightest suggestion of something bad. I kept my back to the wall when I unlocked my door, and I locked it behind me, and I didn't open it until sunrise. If I'd told anyone any of this, they'd have locked me up. It was not sane. I was not sane, I suppose. And I never felt alone in that place after that, not properly. I got some help and moved out. And I actually left some of my stuff behind because I was in such a rush to get out of that place and away from it. And there you go. A ghost story with no ghost. Just the overactive imagination of a waster in his 20s. Except. Of course there's an except. It wouldn't be a ghost story otherwise. Because while I've never had that absolute visceral terror again, there have been a handful of other incidents over the years since when I've been convinced I'm not alone in the house. When I know there's nobody else there, but I'm alone. When I've sped up climbing the stairs at night, convinced something is going to reach through the banisters and grab my ankle. When I've been able to force myself to open a closed door because of the gut-wrenching certainty that there is somebody on the other side of it. And in my memory, it always follows the same pattern. I'll move into a new place, I'll be fine for a bit. And then after a few weeks or a few months, bam, night terrors, sleep paralysis. Waking up barely able to breathe from the kind of nightmare that sees you fucked for the rest of the day. Then a little while later, when I'm by myself, the idea will come creeping over me that there is someone else in the house with me. Someone who wishes me harm. Someone who is just biding their time. It's stupid. I don't believe in ghosts as such. Nor spirits of the dead come back to harass us. I don't believe in haunted houses or demons or malignant entities from beyond the fields we know. I don't believe in any of that shit. But, man, that but gets you every time. And there's a coda to all this, a little delicious twist to keep us warm on a Halloween night. I've been vaguely planning this story out in my head the last couple of days, which means some of these incidents are on my mind for the first time in years. In fact, this is pretty much the first time I've ever really written or spoken about them. And I've skipped a few, needless to say, because this was already getting a little long. I really don't believe in ghosts, but last night I had a nightmare. A proper, honest-to-goodness, chest-squeezing nightmare that woke me up with a sideways lurch, the kind that takes until mid-afternoon before you're straight again. And while I don't believe in ghosts, I'm painfully aware that it's only a matter of time before I'm alone in my new house again. And I'm trying not to think about the idea that whatever it is I don't believe in has found me again. Night night.